In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint an Imperial fist, a Space Marine from the first founding chapters. Yellow is an incredibly difficult colour to paint normally, but with the recent release of contrast paints and other mediums made to make painting yellow easier, now's the time for me to show you how to paint an Imperial fist in a Grimdark theme. So over a white primer, I started with contrast paint and I used Skeleton Horde. I painted this all over the entirety of the model, leaving only the bolter, and I was just careful to make sure I got it in all the recesses and not to leave big globs of it anywhere. But at this stage I wasn't overly worried about leaving any patchiness anywhere, because that will help add to the grim darkness of the feel of the model, and also further stages will cover up any mistakes that I've made. But you can take this base as carefully or as messily as you want, it's up to you. Once I did this, I broke out Pro Acryl Khaki and I got a dry brush, wiped off a lot of the excess paint, and I started stippling this quite liberally over the model, covering about 70% of it. You can see there I'm going in circular motions over the shoulder pads, really to show up the highlights of the model, and doing things like the knee pads and those ridges, picking out bits like down the legs where light will catch, those little ball things on the backpack. And it was onto the ivory, and I used a size 2 brush with a sharp tip on it, and I just placed smaller highlights, again stippling the highlights within the khaki paint. So this was probably maybe 40-50% of the model I was covering with this, being careful not to overdo it and trying to keep my stipples nice and small, just picking out the ridges on the helmet and really focusing on those areas of interest. Finally, before I go on to making this model actually look yellow, I'm going with white, and this is a very concentrated stage. I'm just going in really small on those shoulder pads there, being careful with what I'm doing now, but I'm also going to show you what I do with some of the edges, like the leg armour and those sharp bits of the armour. I don't just do stippling methods on areas like the shoulder pads and round large surface areas. I also do what I like to call jagged edge highlighting, where rather than trying to draw the brush in a sweeping motion in a smooth way across the ridges, I like to sort of stab along it, which you can kind of see me doing there, and that just helps it look rough but also picks out those ridges. Now it's on to Black Templar, and that was painting the tubing, the leg tubing obviously as well, painting the gun, painting those little backpack jet thingies. At this point I still wasn't being as careful as I should have been, and later on I saw the odd black like overspray, I guess, where it's flung onto elsewhere in the model, but that didn't really matter. Then Flesh Tearer's Red came out because I want to make this a third company Imperial fist, which meant carefully painting along the shoulder trim and picking out the eyes at this stage as well, because that'll be a good basis for doing the eyes a bit later on in the video. But I was just careful along here, just not to overdo it and getting too much on the shoulders, because I didn't want it going everywhere and ruining the base I'd already done. But again, any mistakes can just be covered up with khaki or ivory or even white, and that just helps with the roughness of the model. Lastly, after doing the shoulder pads, I did the chest eagle. Yet again, trying to be careful, but I did make mistakes and I had to go back and touch it up here and there. Then it's just the leather holster with a contrast paint, and I used Copper Brown by Vallejo Express Colour. My snake white leather by Citadel were completely dried out, so yeah, those paint pots are crap. I just did the leather gun holster and the little pouches on his back. Once this was done, it was on to the fun part, and that was doing the Imperial Fist yellow. Again, it's a contrast paint by Citadel. Make sure you shake these paints up well because you get a lot of medium settling in the bottom. I went over the entirety of the model that I wanted to be yellow, so I wasn't too worried at this stage about it getting on the black bits or on the red bits, because with them being quite dark, this won't really show up. But this is also a really highly pigmented contrast paint, so it does change how they look if you go over them. So I was trying to be careful not to get it on any of the black tubing, anything like the gun holster. I also made sure I left out the purity seal, because the purity seal was basically already done. It was just Skeleton Horde with Flesh Tearers red wax part, so I didn't want to get it on that either. Just taking my time, being careful, again, making sure it goes in all the recesses and not splodging or pooling anywhere. Now it's on for the transfers, and I used micro set to initially get the transfer stuck in place. I brushed this on, not being too careful, but also I didn't want to cake it in micro set either because it just makes it more difficult. And I just placed the transfers on lightly with the brush, and then use the brush to manipulate them and get them into the right position so that they look decent. Basically, you get some good working time with the micro set, so this is a good bit for it, and I prefer it to water. It just really gets them stuck in place. I then pushed them down with it firmly with a paper towel just to make sure they're stuck down nicely and start conforming to the shoulder pads. Once this was done, I went over this twice with Micro Sol, which softens the decals and again helps them conform to surfaces. You don't need to do this for flat surfaces, but you do when it comes to curved surfaces like the shoulder pads. I didn't leave much time between this and the micro set, so the transfers tore a little bit, but that actually helped with getting this model looking grimdark. Lastly, I grabbed some matte varnish by Army Painter. I went over those transfers just so that they blended in with the armour and didn't look like a nice shiny transfer. Really doesn't look good unless you add the varnish over the top of transfers. You can use something like a Lamia Media, but I prefer a varnish. I also went over the Flesh Tearers red, so the chest eagle and the shoulder pads, because for whatever reason that was quite glossy. Once that was done, I picked out the metal areas with Vallejo Metal Colour Steel mixed 50-50 with Dark Silver by Pro Acryl. Now for the eyes, and I used a fluorescent pink for this, but anyone who's used fluorescents will know that they're very translucent, so this didn't really give the effect I wanted, but it is what it is. I thought the eyes still stood out well enough, so I thought I'd leave them alone after this. I'm just using a much smaller brush and just taking my time, but I'd advise using a bigger brush with a sharp tip because the paint won't dry out so quickly on the tip. And if you're enjoying the video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I release videos every week. So now that's all done, I'm just painting the base rim black and doing this nice and thin, taking my time with it. But while I'm here, I'm also going to be painting the base itself, and this bit's really crucial that you don't get any on the boots of the model because you will not be able to cover that up very easily. Once that's dried, I then go on to texture basing, and I'm using that dark and dry crackle effect paint by AK Interactive, and I'm just liberally putting it on the model quite thick. Again, being careful not to overdo it because I don't want it splashing all over the base rim, but I'm also purposely putting some on the boots of the model to tie it into the base and the background. Once this is done, the model is finished. So there you have it, a quick and easy Imperial Fist that is achievable for absolutely anybody. You can take out bits you don't like, add bits that you do like, and take it further if you want to go even grittier. If you like this video, please give a like on it because it really helps me grow this channel, and also consider subscribing. I release videos weekly on a Saturday morning, 9:30 British time. I'll see you on the next one.